What's up, everybody, and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills, joined by John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, to get everyone prepared for an AFC East showdown on Sunday in Orchard Park between the Bills and Jets. Round two. Jets got the first one. We'll see who gets the second one. Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun and it's easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. Here's what you do. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know that you will too. In fact, first-time users, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. John, what's going up, my guy? A lot has changed really over the last few weeks since the Bills and Jets played last, a Jets win, and it's good to be here with you and catching up on all things Bills and Jets.
Joe, the Jets, of course, won that game. Zach Wilson, I think, played effectively. It was not a great performance. The Jets then went into their bye week, and if you had told me after that game that Zach Wilson was one game away from being benched, I'm not sure I would have believed you, but of course that's what happened. Right out of their bye, the Jets had a horrible loss to the New England Patriots 10-3, which they lost on a last-minute punt return for a touchdown. I mean, I've watched the Jets, Joe, for just about 30 years at this point, and I've seen them lose every which way. I don't think I've ever seen them lose on a last-minute punt return touchdown up until that game. But more than anything, that game, the offense really struggled. It was a really bad performance by Zach Wilson. It was to the point where he could not even hit a check down. And then it's well known what happened after the game, where he said he did not feel like he let down the defense. There were some hard feelings in the locker room. And I think all of this just built to the point where Robert Saleh decided to make a change at the quarterback position. And, looking back, Joe, the Jets had a 4-game winning streak, in October this year. And I look back at some of the comments Robert Saleh made, and it becomes clearer to me that this was, the New England game was not the first time he thought about maybe making a quarterback change, because it was one of those things that flew over my head at the time. And only after you go back and you think about the context of everything that happened, you saw that Saleh made some comments, even after some games that the Jets won, that they needed more out of the quarterback position. And I think overall, the Jets just did not feel like they were getting enough from Zach Wilson. And part of it is mechanically, he had just regressed to a point where it was tough to keep putting him on the field. In fact, the Jets are not even activating Zach Wilson at this point. He's running the scout team. And the reason for that is they don't want him to even think about needing to install a game plan. They just want him to focus on his fundamentals, try and fix himself. They'll tell you that they're going to put him back in the lineup this year. Obviously, it depends on what happens going forward with what happens with Mike White and whether the team keeps winning or losing games. I think if they were being honest, they would tell you that they're not sure what's going to happen. They're not sure whether Zach Wilson's going to go back in. But Mike White has taken over at quarterback. Last year, he threw for 405 yards on Halloween against the Bengals, played a really solid first quarter, got injured Thursday night against the Colts. And then his third start that year was a game against these Buffalo Bills the Jets are facing on Sunday, and it went terribly. He threw for 4 interceptions. Joe, I remember the first time Jets and Bills met this year, and you laid it out for Zach Wilson about as well as anybody I've heard lay it out all season long. And you spoke in detail about how the Jets were looking for Zach Wilson to execute Mike LaFleur's offense, not looking for him to freelance, not looking for him to do anything special outside the structure of the play call. Just execute the plays that are put in front of you. And too frequently this year, Zach Wilson hasn't been able to do that. Mike White, I don't know if this guy is the future of the Jets. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. But I think at this point in time, he's probably the best quarterback for this team right now, because he goes out and he executes Mike LaFleur's offense. He doesn't lock onto receivers. He hits the open guy, and sometimes it's a matter of checking it down. Sometimes it's frustrating because it's third down, nobody's open, so he checks it down. He takes a minimal gain. The Jets have to punt, but he doesn't make the big mistake. I know he threw 2 interceptions this past Sunday, and one of them was on a ball that hit Corey Davis in the hands. Another was kind of a desperation heave near the end of the game. He's avoided the big mistake. He's gotten the ball where it needs to go, and he finds the guy Mike LaFleur wants him to get the ball to. And most weeks for the Jets, it wasn't true last week. Last week, the Jets had a bad defensive performance. It probably won't be true this week because the Jets are going to need something special to beat this Buffalo Bills team, which is an outstanding football team and a team that's tough to beat once in a year, much less twice in a year. But most of the time, with what the Jets have on defense, a quarterback playing effectively, a quarterback playing within the system is going to give them a great chance to win games. So I think at this point in time, the quarterback's the story. It's Mike White. I'm lying to you if I told you I was expecting Mike White to step in. Mike White's, I don't know if I'd say he's made a believer out of me, but he's played way better than I thought he would in these 2 weeks, even though last week was kind of uneven. So it's the quarterback position for the Jets, as it so frequently is. Let me turn the tables, Joe. What's going on with the Buffalo Bills?
Well, if I could comment a little bit there, John, because you're right. I went in on Zach Wilson that week leading up to that first Bills game. And not only did I do it on our crossover discussion, but I did it on Locked On Bills. I did it on a couple of different radio spots on the Draft Dudes podcast that I also do. And then Zach Wilson went out and did the thing I said he wouldn't do, right, against the Bills, right, for that one game. I'm like, oh, my God, this guy's making me eat crow. And then it didn't take long for him to remind everyone of why I went on that rant and, was benched shortly thereafter. So it's been a weird relationship with my analysis and Zach Wilson and how that's all played out. But yeah, I think to your point, Mike White comes in and runs the offense. He does. He executes the offense and he keeps it between the lines. And with the way that this team is constructed, with the outstanding defense that they have, with the playmakers, right, with Garrett Wilson and what he's been able to unlock there. I mean, he's been sensational. Monster game against Minnesota, a couple of touchdowns, 92 yards against Chicago. There's good players: Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios, Corey Davis, 2 good tight ends. And seemingly you've got 4 good pass catching running backs, or I guess 5 if you count Breece Hall in his injury. I mean, it's just been it's a system that is relying on a quarterback that can distribute the football into the hands of playmakers. And say what you want about Mike White, he does that, and that's obviously what this Jets team needs based on the way that they're constructed. So I would agree that he's giving them their best chance to win. Now, where you get excited is if you can get Zach Wilson to do that, plus all the physical talent that he brings to the table with some of the fun off-script stuff, but that you can't major in that, right? You have to minor in that and keep the main thing. But I think they've got the right quarterback in the lineup right now. As it relates to the Buffalo Bills and kind of the big storyline entering this game, is just how much is different since then. And, you did a good job of outlining what's going on with Mike White, and certainly the offensive line's gotten healthy with George Fant back in the mix. And, even defensively, they've been phenomenal all season long. But from the Bills side of things, I think they're going to be really excited to have some of their defensive talent back in this football game. And of course, Von Miller, he's out for the season, and that's a big hit to the Bills. He missed last week, and there was always a wonder if and when he would come back this year, but obviously that's not going to happen until 2023. But even with Von Miller no longer in the mix, the Bills are going to have Jordan Poyer for this game. They're going to have Matt Milano. They're going to have Trey White, which are 3 players defensively that they didn't have in that first game that the Jets won. And one of the biggest reasons why the Bills lost that football game against the Jets was they just struggled to tackle. I mean, Michael Carter killed him, especially on that drive. I'm pretty sure I could just say that drive, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, where they iced the game. They said, we're going to go win this football game, and the Bills couldn't stop them. And Michael Carter kind of put the team on his back. I think he averaged over 6 yards after contact per rush in that game. I mean, just an outstanding performance from him. And I'm not sure of his availability for Sunday, but I know that Bam Knight out of North Carolina State, a player I liked a ton there, has come in and really played good football for them. And he's a really competitive runner that I like a good bit. And so regardless, the point that I'm trying to make here is I think the Bills are going to be really happy about having Jordan Poyer instead of Jaquan Johnson, and Matt Milano instead of Terrell Bernard making his first career start, and, an all-pro corner and Trey White. That's going to be a big boost for the defense this time around. And offensively, I'm excited to see what it looks like, because I love what the Jets have going on defense. I think even Bills fans are getting a little annoyed with me by how much praise I've given them. But, hey, I like fundamentally sound defenses. I like deep defensive lines. I like sound coverage corners. I like speed on the second level. So you get from this Jets unit. And when they played the Bills the first time, it was kind of in a lull for the Bills on offense as a result of turnovers. And the Bills, that Jets game was in the middle of a 3-game stretch where the Bills turned it over 8 times. Of course, the Jets got a couple of those off of Josh Allen. Where I think the Bills have kind of come out of that over the last 3 games. They've only turned it over a combined 2 times, which are literally the 3 games after that lull that I was just talking about. So they've corrected that issue in a lot of ways, and Josh Allen has kind of gotten back to playing confident Josh Allen style of football. And, you look at this first matchup, the Jets held the Bills to 17 points, 317 yards. That was the lowest points and yards they've had this season. And so that second divisional matchup is always really, really telling. I think that's how you get a really good feel for what your coaching staff is, what your personnel is, because these are very common opponents. Not only have you played them once already and seen that firsthand, but you got all the common opponents, right? You've seen teams that are familiar with them, game plan, and you can really pick things off of what other teams have put on tape. And so that second division game is always very, very telling. And I think that we will learn a lot about both teams by being able to extrapolate what this game tells us as a measuring stick for not just the talent and personnel, but these 2 coaching staff. So I think there's a lot to learn, but also obviously a lot to gain here with the Bills now controlling their own destiny, number 1 seed in the AFC, and the Jets at 7-5. You figure you get 3 more wins, you get to 10, you're in. The playoff drought's over, right? So there's a lot here for both teams at stake.
No question about it, Joe.
This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. You can find Block Forever now, wherever you get your podcasts. Block Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil takes the conversation about football to the next level. He gives football fans an insider's look at the game through the eyes of the greatest players and personalities of all time. You can catch new episodes of Block Forever every week. They'll be recorded and released ahead of Thursday Night Football. So find it for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Audible, get in the game. John, as we continue this conversation, want to focus in on the matchups, the key matchups here that can win the game. And I will give you the honors here to take this where you want to take it here to start this conversation.
Well, Joe, my matchups are a little bit broader than normal. I was trying to find a matchup on the Jets defensive line versus the Bills offensive line. It's easy to say Quinnen Williams because he's been the best player on the team all year. In fact, that first game against Buffalo was one of his many strong games through the season. But I almost just want to say Jets defensive line versus Bills offensive line, because in the second half of that first meeting, Jets defense played very well. They had the upper hand after a first half where it felt like the Bills were really moving the ball at will. And at every Buffalo drive that ended in no points in that half, the key play was a sack. The Jets got a sack on every drive that essentially put the Bills behind the sticks. If it didn't come on third down, maybe it came on first down, but it just put the Bills in a really tough situation. And this defense for the Jets has 2 calling cards. They have a tremendous group of corners. Sauce Gardner gets all of the acclaim, but DJ Reed has been almost as good this year. He's been an outstanding signing from the Seattle Seahawks. Really plays a lot of really sticky coverage, a good value signing. And in the slot, Michael Carter II is quietly putting together an excellent season. So the coverage matters for the Jets, but really this defense, more than anything else, is built around this defensive line. And they love to rotate guys in and out. They like to play a lot of guys, but the key guys, the number 1 guy is Quinnen Williams. But Carl Lawson's also having a really solid comeback season. He was their big free agent signing a year ago from the Cincinnati Bengals. They were very excited about him. And then he suffers an injury in a preseason joint practice with Green Bay. And you also have John Franklin Myers, an excellent player who he's a bigger guy on the 290, 300 pounds, plays defensive end a lot in the Jets system, but will kick inside on passing downs. So their ability to get after Josh Allen, but also their ability to not let Josh Allen escape. One of those sacks came on a bootleg where Jermaine Johnson chased him down in the open field and brought him down. And against a quarterback like Allen, I think it's as important to be controlled and stay in your assigned lanes when you're rushing to him as it is to win your assignment, because Josh Allen is such a dynamic runner. If he gets into the open field, the Jets could be in a lot of trouble. So it's not just about winning, it's about staying disciplined. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with Bam Knight, who we talked about against the Buffalo defense. Usually I pick like individual players, but I think back to that drive. And I also think back to the preseason. Joe, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of preseason games, watching preseason football. Part of it's the month of August, so it's the summer. You like to go out, but one of the things I do enjoy about the preseason is that you get into the fourth quarter of these games, and you see somebody who looks really good, somebody who kind of makes an impact, and then you kind of forget about them. And occasionally, what happens is you suffer enough injuries where you get to November and you say, "Hey, I remember that guy. That guy was in playing pretty well in the preseason." And that's what happened with Bam Knight. He was a guy who kind of stood out in the third and fourth quarter of Jets preseason games, and they had a crowded backfield. They drafted Breece Hall in the second round out of Iowa State. They still had Michael Carter. They had a talented group in the backfield, so there wasn't a spot for him. He went to the practice squad. 2 weeks ago against the Chicago Bears, he got into the lineup, and he's looked like a complete back so far. He's run tough inside, but what he really brings to the table, I think, is a big play element. He's got that second gear, and that's the thing the Jets have missed since Breece Hall left the lineup, because Michael Carter's a solid back. Michael Carter's a tough runner. You mentioned that he gets yards after contact, but he doesn't have that extra gear. He's not a guy who's going to break 20, 30-yard runs. And I think Bam Knight adds that big play dimension for the Jets out of the backfield. So especially after what happened in the first meeting between these games where the Jets won the game because they ran the ball so effectively, I'm looking at Bam Knight versus the Bills' run defense. Now let me flip it over to you, Joe. What do you see as the key matchups?
Yeah, Bam Knight, man, I loved him at NC State. He was a really good kick returner as well. So that speaks to that second gear that you mentioned there. Let me say one thing about that Jermaine Johnson play. That was an unbelievable play that we're not talking enough about. I think it won him the game. I really do. I don't think I've ever seen Josh go down on that type of a tackle, but Jermaine Johnson is a top shelf athlete, and he made an outstanding play. I thought Josh was going to run for a long ways there, but Jermaine Johnson had other plans. I honestly think that when you say every game there's 3-4 plays that really swing the whole thing, that's one of them that we're not going to talk a whole lot about, but my goodness, that was a hell of a play. John, for me, I really kind of want to focus on a lot of the same stuff that you did, but from the lens of that Bills offense against this really, really good Jets defense. You've done a very good job of talking about the talent that they have on all three levels. And where I get interested is, how do the Bills evolve? How do they adjust? How do they use what they've done over the last 3 games since these two teams played and incorporate that against this really good Jets defense? They're 6th in scoring. They're 4th in yards per game. This pass defense is unbelievable. They've held 7 of 12 opponents this year under 200 yards passing. The most they've given up all year is to the Bengals in week 3, 261. I mean, nobody's moving the ball on the Jets through the air. And so how do the Bills find some success that other teams haven't been able to find, including the Bills once already this year against the Jets? And so I'm looking for the running backs is kind of where I want to start the conversation. Nyheim Hines is a new addition to this football team that finally got a chance to be on the field for a decent amount of time. He played over 30% of the offensive snaps against the Patriots the last time the Bills played on Thursday. And, since they had traded for him and acquired him, they really haven't had a lot of normal opportunities to practice, because coming out of the Jets game, as everybody remembers, Josh Allen was injured and had that elbow problem, and he didn't practice that entire next week. Well, the following week, the Bills had sicknesses and the snowstorm, which limited them to being able to practice and having to travel to Detroit to play a home game. And then you turn around to a quick week against the Lions again, a short opportunity to prepare and some unusual dynamics. And the Bills kind of finally had a chance to practice with some regularity, and they got Nyheim Hines going offensively, not necessarily in terms of touches. I think he had 3 touches. But the fact that he was on the field and they used him for motion and a lot of window dressing, which I'm sure there's going to be some elements that are built off of that in future weeks. Well, it's future weeks now, right? So how do you challenge this Jets defense with that dynamic that they haven't really seen before? James Cook is a player, a rookie running back, 2nd-round pick out of Georgia, that was really the Bills' focal point of their backfield last week against New England, and that hasn't really happened this year. It's been Devin Singletary's backfield. Well, James Cook really kind of ate into that opportunity. 6 catches, a bunch of carries at over 20 carries. He hadn't had, or 20 touches. He hadn't had 20 touches since high school in a game. That's including his time at Georgia and, of course, this year. And so I'm sure they're going to want to unleash him a little bit more. And, for a good zone, solid defense, pass coverage that the Jets are going to give you, you're going to want to throw the ball to these running backs and take your checkdowns. And I think in Nyheim Hines and in James Cook and even Devin Singletary, they're going to want to get these running backs going a little bit more. And I think that'll help them open some things up as they really challenge you horizontally. And, of course, the big play potential that they have with Josh Allen as your quarterback as a runner, and of course with the deep throws, it puts maximum stress on a defense. And I think the Bills are positioned pretty well to use all of that, because in a sound defense like this that's going to throw waves of good defensive linemen at you, that has a really good talented back seven, you have to find ways to put maximum stress on that. And I think the Bills kind of have some of those ingredients to do that this time around. And so how Ken Dorsey evolves this time around and uses everything at his disposal to maybe put some of those Jets defenders in conflict and really make them think about getting coverage depth, because so much is happening in front of them, right? I'm really, really fascinated to see how this Bills offense responds round 2 here against a Jets defense that was able to get a couple of takeaways, that was able to bottle them up, was able to get key stops and key moments. And here's that second opportunity to play them again. And I think one thing that's going to be really, really important is going to be turnovers. They're always the stat, right? Turnover margin is correlative to winning. And the Bills have been in a good spot offensively with not turning over the ball over the last few weeks. And the Jets haven't really taken it away. They've only forced 1 turnover the last 3 games. They've only had multiple takeaways in a game 3 times this season. And so I think that's probably the piece. When I look at the Jets and this top shelf defense that they have, I'm looking for it to become more of a big play defense and start to take away the football a little bit more. And so from the Bills side of things, you hope that doesn't happen this week. And that's kind of their inconsistent takeaways stay that way for Buffalo. But I think that's always the X factor. And certainly from the Bills side of things, you hope that their good fortune with the takeaway or the turnover department stays the way that it has been over the last 3 games. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get in on your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts.
This episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills is brought to you by Built Bar. By late Sunday afternoon, one fan base is going to be happy, the other is going to be kind of bummed out. Whether you're looking to celebrate or cheer up, let me suggest Built Bar. Built Bar has a number of new reimagined flavors, and they're all delicious, from cookie dough topper to cookie brownie bar to coconut brownie topper and white chocolate peppermint granola. This is Built's taste on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. If you haven't tried Built Bars before, well, let me tell you about all of them. They are absolutely delicious. They all have 100% real chocolate. They have 17 grams of protein and shockingly low sugar and calories, just 130 calories. Sink your teeth into that first bite, and it will change your life forever. These are so good, Joe. I'm sure you've had a number of the flavors. Doesn't matter which flavor, and I always love it when a new one comes out. You've got to try them. And you can get 15% off your order right now by using code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. Again, that code is LOCKEDON15. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDON, number 1, number 5, for 15% off at built, BUILT.com.
Well, John, they make us do predictions. And so here we are. We have to do this. And so this is your opportunity, John. You're going to predict the Jets to sweep the Bills in the year 2022. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I don't think I can, because I picked the Bills to win the first game and the Jets won. So and that's going to be my excuse, because every time I pick against the Jets, I think people get mad at me. And, fortunately, the Jets have been good this year. In the past, Joe, I've always had to pick against the Jets because they've been so bad that it's just been impossible to pick them most weeks. This year, I'm on a string where I'm picking them practically every week. but not this week. This is a tough venue for the Jets. This is an excellent Bills team. They're a tough team to beat once. I mean, I'm impressed that the Jets were able to do it the first time, but now they got to go up to Buffalo. They're not going to catch the Bills off guard. I don't think Mike White's going to throw 4 interceptions like he did last year when these teams played at the Meadowlands, but I just have a bad feeling about this one. And last week the Jets lost a heartbreaker in Minnesota. There were probably 5 or 10 plays. Any one of them could have changed the outcome. And it was a frustrating loss, but it was a frustrating loss in part because you knew the Jets were going to have to come here. And banking that win against Minnesota would have been really important. I think the Jets will play a competitive game. I'm not expecting them to be completely blown out. I think this defense will keep them in the game. But like I said earlier, most weeks the Jets will just need Mike White to go out there, play efficient football. They won't need a ton of playmaking out of their quarterback. They'll just need him to execute the offense. I think they need something more than that this week. And I'm not sure. And I like Mike White. He's he's really surprised me. I was not expecting him to play as well as he's played. And I think there will be better days ahead for Mike White. But this is a tough defense. This is a tough matchup. You know that Buffalo offense is angry after what happened in the first game. And the Jets defense should hold their own. But I'm taking the Bills in this one 23-17.
You want to talk about heartbreakers against Minnesota, John?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't mean to do that, Joe.
I'll be honest with you. I think what are the Vikings? Are they 9-2 or something like that? I'm pretty sure they've delivered 9 heartbreakers, but I don't think anything can top that Bills game, man. That was something else. I see it a lot like you do, John. I do. I think the Bills win this game. I have my score prediction as 27-20. There's certainly all the buzzy things that we can say about beating a team twice and going into Buffalo to do it. Seems like a tall order. And I think the Jets are positioned the best they can right now with Mike White at quarterback, with that strong defense and how he's unlocking the skill players. And I think that's really, really helpful. But I think that Matt Milano and Jordan Poyer make up the difference for the Bills on defense, especially with, the Jets wanting to rely a lot on yards after catch and in getting the ball in the hands of those playmakers. Those are really good space players that the Bills didn't have last time around, and really led to some sizable chunk gains after contact because, look, Jaquan Johnson couldn't make tackles in space. I think that'll be a lot better this time around. And I think that Josh Allen is out of his little turnover issue that he was having with kind of that second half against Green Bay into the Jets game. And then of course, Minnesota, where he's playing a lot more confident. And I think that things have normalized more for the Bills on offense, and they're going to be back home. The Bills haven't played at home a lot at all this year. Not only is it one of those years that you have, the Jets are in the same boat. We only have 8 home games and 9 road games, but you lost one of your home games to go play in Detroit, and your schedule was already road heavy to start. And so I think the Bills are going to be really happy to be back at home for this ball game. They got extra time to prepare as well. They played last on Thursday night. I think that will help them as well with the rest advantage playing at home. The Jets, I don't think it ends the season. My buddy Chris Schubert, he's a Jets fan. He's a producer of Draft Dudes with me, and he feels like they have to win this game. Like it's an absolute must win for the Jets. I'd say, well, you got Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle coming up with Miami in week. I think if you get 3 of them, you can. Now it obviously reduces your margin, right? You kind of hope that you get that Vikings game to give you a little buffer for this one. But I think the Jets, it's all right there out in front of them, even if they don't get this game. But I mean, the Bills are favored by almost 10 points in this ball game. I don't think the Jets go in to Orchard Park and win, but they're going to play the game, and we'll find out, because I didn't think the Jets would win the first time around, and Zach Wilson went out and did all the things I said he couldn't do, and they won the ball game. So it's going to be a good competitive ball game, but I have the Bills coming out on top 27-20. All right. So there it is. We did the storylines. We did the matchups. We did the predictions. We did the thing here, John. We did all the stuff we were supposed to do on Crossover Thursday. Look, maybe we'll do it again. Maybe there's a little January matchup between these two teams. So maybe there's a third Bills-Jets crossover discussion coming to everyone later this year. But both teams in good spot here to go on a run and get to the postseason. And, I think that would make both fan bases quite happy, but only one will be happy at the end of the day on Sunday. All right, folks, that's it for today. As always, we do kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bills and Locked On Jets your first listen today. Be sure to check out all the other great podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we'll catch up with you again tomorrow.